Welcome everyone to the Instructor Essentials screencast. I'm Dr. Doug Masterson and I'm the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Affairs here in the College of Science and Technology. And you can see all of my contact information down here. Certainly you can reach me by my email, douglas.masterson@usm.edu. You can stop by in the Dean's office and see me in the Bobby Chain Technology Building, room 103B. You can also see my office direct line is listed as well as my cell, so please feel free to either give me a call on my cell phone or text me anything that you might have a question on. Also, you can get in touch or see some of my other screencasts on my YouTube channel at USM OrgChem. If you'll search that in YouTube, you can find that. So today, the goals of this screencast are to give you an overall view of the things that we need to keep in mind as instructors at the University of Southern Mississippi. And this is really geared towards our adjunct instructors. Many of you get hired kind of just right before the semester starts, and I want to make sure that everyone knows the essentials that you need to keep in mind as we are teaching our students and helping them to progress. But I do want to welcome you to Southern Miss. If you haven't taught with us before, you're helping us perform a vital mission of teaching our students, and many of you will be teaching students in fairly large classes, and so I hope that what you find in this screencast to be helpful. So today I'm going to cover 9 quick topics. We're going to talk about student success. That's the number one thing I want to talk about. I've been involved at the University of Southern Mississippi in a number of student success initiatives, and many of you as instructors will be teaching courses at the level where students really struggle the most. That is some of our earlier classwork in the 100 and 200 level. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about student success. I want to make sure that we're keeping good student records in the event that any kind of grade review or something like that should happen. We need to make sure we're keeping good student records. I want to talk with you a little bit about how to communicate with students. I want to talk with you a little bit about disability accommodations, make sure we're providing the accommodations we need to the right students. I want to talk to you a little bit about remaining FERPA compliant. FERPA is a federal law, and we need to make sure that we are protecting students' privacy. I'll talk with you a little bit about general education curriculum, or as we call it here at Southern Miss, the GEC. And many of these are kind of those gen ed courses, if you will, that all of our students are going to be taking. And many of you are probably teaching in the GEC. So I want to talk with you a little bit about that. And then talk to you a little bit about syllabus requirements, what it is that we absolutely have to have in our syllabus as we hand those out to our students to make sure that students are informed of the necessary policies and requirements in each of the courses. Now I'll talk to you a little bit about grades and grading requirements, and then how we reflect on our teaching. It's very important, I think, that we all reflect on our teaching quite regularly, because teaching is a process, and hopefully every semester that we teach we get a little bit better. So I want to start off by talking about student success. This is a top priority at USM, and as I mentioned previously, I've been involved in a variety of student success initiatives here at Southern Miss, and I take this topic quite seriously. Student success is defined by a variety of things, but here at Southern Miss, there's 3 main things that we typically think of when we talk about student success. The first is students earning C or better grades in their courses. So if a student earns a C, a B, or an A, we typically take that to mean that the student has successfully completed that course and is capable of moving on to doing other things. So if they get a D, F, or a W, or an I, we do not consider that as a student success story that we want to tell. We want our students to be able to move on and progress. So the C grade is certainly one definition of student success. We also look at student persistence, year to year, semester to semester, etc. We want our students to come to Southern Miss as freshmen and complete their freshman year and move on and be sophomores. We consider that a student success. We also want students to come in the fall and progress to the spring, or the spring into the next fall. in good academic standing. So this is another area that we look at in terms of student success. And then we also look at student progression towards degree. And this is called our Finish in 4 campaign that we have here at USM, but also around the state and around the country. Colleges are becoming more and more concerned about students taking far too long to finish their degree and move on to bigger and better things in life. And so we have been pushing Finish in 4, and so students need to be taking not only be considered full-time students, they need to be taking enough hours that count towards their degree so that they can finish in 4 years. And typically that means they need to complete a little over 30 hours per calendar year to be able to finish in 4. So we can have students that are earning good grades and are persisting, but if they're not progressing towards that degree, that is a cause for concern as well. So you might be thinking, what can you do as an instructor to help promote student success? After all, student success is primarily the responsibility of the student. They're the ones that have to do all the work. However, there are a number of things that we can do as instructors that help promote students to be successful. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is provide meaningful feedback to students on a regular basis. So one of the worst things I think that can happen is we set our courses up such that students don't receive meaningful feedback from us on a regular basis. So if you set your course up to where it's a midterm and a final and that's all the feedback that the students are ever going to get, by the time they take that midterm, it's probably too late for them to drop the course if they end up not doing well in that. And there's not a whole lot of time left for them to digest why they perform poorly on that midterm and then try to do a better job on the final exam. So it's very important that we provide frequent feedback, have small assignments early on in the semester where we give students feedback on how they're performing. Not just a grade on the exam or a grade on the assignment, but give them some meaningful feedback. Let them know where they can improve and how they can improve and what they're doing well on and etc. Another thing that we can do is remain accessible to students. One of the things students will quite frequently try to find you and seek out help. And so make sure that you keep good office hours so that the students can readily find you and meet with you and discuss any issues that they may be having in the course or in their plan of study, not just necessarily your course. Sometimes students come to us to talk about a variety of issues. And so remaining accessible to students, I think, is another thing that we can do to help promote student success. Also remember that students, they're not just taking our courses, or our course, right? They're taking multiple courses and they have other obligations. A good chunk of our students are actually working part-time to full-time while they're trying to take a full course load. And while that may not be a wise decision on their part, it may be a reality that they have to just deal with. And so we just need to keep in mind that there are other obligations that students have. And it's not just our course, our specific course, I should say, that is the only thing that occupies their time. So to kind of give you an idea, for every hour that a student is in class, they should be spending about 2 hours outside of class preparing for class. So a 3-hour course should take them in a week about 9 hours of time total. So if they're taking 4 courses, that's a pretty heavy load already. So just keep that in mind as you design assignments and other things. Remember, they have other obligations that they have to get done as well. Keep in mind that learning is the primary goal. We want our students to learn, and if we set our courses up in a way that actually hinders learning, that's not going to promote student success. So it's not all just about the final performance. And don't get me wrong, that's certainly something that we have to measure is performance in our courses, but keep in mind that student learning is the primary goal. And if students are learning and progressing that way, try to take that into account in terms of how you assess the student. It would be helpful if you'd be familiar with available resources. The most valuable resource, in my opinion, is our Success website, and you can find that at www.usm.edu/success. I've actually made this my homepage on my web browser. I think it's a very, very useful resource available for not only students but also for faculty. And this is a screen capture of what that Student Success website looks like, and what you'll see over on the left are a variety of areas. So there's a place for students. If they were to click on that, they could find information about tutorial centers across campus and tips to study, etc. Parents even have a way to link in to find resources for things that they may need to know as they help their students get a college degree. But also we have a faculty and staff section where you can find all kinds of information about things related to student success. So if you're going to have an advising role, you can find some advising resources. You can find our faculty handbook link there quite easily. And you can also find this SSSC recommendations. That stands for the Student Success Steering Committee recommendations. And if you're curious about some of the things that committee came up with that we should be doing as faculty to help promote student success, I would highly recommend that you look through that document. It's not a terribly long document, and it gives good information that I think you can use as you think about your courses. So let's talk about some bookkeeping types of topics, and the first of those is keeping student records. It is essential that you keep copies of all student records that you have. It is possible that a student will file a grade appeal, and we need to have access to all of our student records so that in the event that should happen, although that's fairly rare, but it does happen, that we can make our case for why a student received a particular grade. So, it's essential to keep copies of all student records. That includes individual assignment grades, attendance records, and I put a star by this because having an attendance policy is considered to be one of the best practices for student success. So we know that students who actually attend class do better. And so if you're having an attendance policy, make sure that you keep your attendance records by whatever means necessary in your grade book so that we can use those records at a later date if we need to. Make sure you keep copies of student email and correspondence. One of the things that I do that I think works really well is I actually set up a subfolder on my Outlook email program for each one of the courses that I teach. And when I receive emails from students, I just direct it into those folders so that I can keep everything kind of neat and tidy. Email correspondence is going to be the primary way that a lot of students will communicate with you. And it's very, very important that we keep that in the event that there's any kind of issue that we need to go back to that correspondence for. Make sure you keep copies of your Scantron answer sheets if you do multiple choice exams. It's very, very important because students will quite frequently come in and argue that the Scantron made a mistake, and sometimes it has. And we need to give students credit for everything that they've gotten right. But sometimes they come to you and they may have made some alterations. And so if you pull out that copy of the Scantron sheet, you can show that they've altered it, and then it becomes a cheating issue, which we'll talk about in just a few moments. Make sure that you keep your grade books. Most of us, I don't think today, would use a paper grade book. If you do, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just make sure you keep a copy in the event that something should happen to your grade book. But most of us are going to keep our grade books in some type of spreadsheet. And you can use Excel or another spreadsheet program for that, quite common. But you can also use Blackboard. So if you're using the Blackboard learning system here at Southern Miss, either to deliver an online course or to use it as a supplemental shell where students can get other resources for your course, Blackboard does have a gradebook feature that works quite well, and you can have the Office of Online Learning show you how to use those features within Blackboard. It's very important that you keep backup copies of your Excel spreadsheets or other gradebook records. Make sure it's on some type of secured media. A lot of people will use a flash drive, some back it up on CD or DVD. I happen to use a redundant hard drive that's external to keep my backup copies. But one of the things that we want to avoid is a computer crash and then losing all that student grade information. And so make sure you keep appropriate backups. That is one of the advantages in Blackboard. Blackboard's on the web, and so it is regularly and redundantly backed up. So we should be able to recover anything that happens to get lost due to, let's say your computer crashes. If it was on Blackboard, it will be backed up on the servers. You need to make sure you provide the department with copies of your grade books at the end of the semester. You can email them to your chair or whoever the chair designates that these need to go to. Because as an adjunct instructor, if you're not planning on returning in the spring, we need to know where those grades are. And if you have them on your personal computer, it's going to be hard for us to access them. So make sure that copies of your grade books are turned into your department or school at the end of each semester, or whenever your chair or director mandates that you turn in those copies. So it may be more than just at the end of the semester. Make sure you properly identify assignments in the grade books and how the grade is actually computed. If we have to go back and look in your grade books for something at some point and you're no longer with us, it becomes difficult if things are not properly identified. So make sure that each assignment is clearly identified and show us how that final grade was computed in your spreadsheet. So one of the things that I like to do in my spreadsheets at the bottom is I'll make little notes about how the assignments were counted throughout the semester, or any alterations that I made. I make sure that I make some little notes at the bottom of that. That way, if anybody ever has to go back, they know that Susie got an A, and here's how that was computed, and it makes sense, and it's consistent with how all the other students were graded as well. Make sure you include the full name of the student and the ID number. The ID number is very, very important because it makes searching in SOAR for a student a lot easier than just by full name. There are some students that will have the same first and last name. There's a lot of John Smiths in the world, for example, but there's only one John Smith at the University of Southern Mississippi that has a particular ID number, and so we need to make sure that we've accurately identified students within our grade books as well. Communicating with students, it's very important that we have clear communication. It's very essential. Students will be getting feedback from us and communications on a regular basis, and we need to make sure that it's not confusing to the student. Okay, so it could be written communication. Your syllabus is considered a written communication to the students. It could be in emails to the class or emails to individual students, or it can be informal letters that you might send to individual students. Regardless of what type of written communication we're dealing with, make sure that the communication is as clear as possible. And one of the ways to ensure that is to have somebody who had nothing to do with what you were writing kind of take a look at it and see if they understand what it is that you're trying to get across. Email must be from your USM email account to a student's USM email account. We don't want situations where you're using your Google account or your Yahoo account or your Hotmail account to email students. And we don't want you emailing to students Hotmail or Gmail or whatever other personal accounts that they may have directly. The reason is because USM email is backed up on the USM server, and should there ever be an issue with communication with a student, we can retrieve those emails and prove our case, whatever the case may be, with the situation. So make sure that you always use that USM provided email account for all official communications with students in your classes. Phone communication, I would highly recommend that you use your office phone if you're provided an office phone. Um, one of the things about giving out your cell phone is that students will feel the privilege of being able to call you at all times of the day and night. So having that office phone is certainly a fortunate thing. Skype is okay. I've used Skype for a number of student communications in the past where we needed to see video so that I could help the student. So that's okay. I would still do Skype within my office on my office computer and not do something like that at home, just because for me, the home's a private place, really no place for the student to be intruding, so to speak. So keep those phone communications as professional and as official as possible. I would avoid doing one-on-one text messaging with students. Um, it's generally considered not to be a great idea to do that, in part because you have to give them your cell phone number. But two, it can also give the impression of being friendly with students. And while we don't want to be adversarial towards students, we certainly don't want a situation where some students feel like they're in the in, if you will, and others are on the out with the instructor. So avoid that one-on-one text messaging. The use of Blackboard is encouraged for all communications. Blackboard has a messaging system within it to where you can email or blast out an email or a written communication to all of the students quite easily through the Blackboard format. And again, the Office of Online Learning can help you figure out how to do all of those functions within Blackboard fairly easily. Avoid the use of social media. Social media is one of those things that has become pervasive. It is everywhere. There are multiple types of social media these days, not just the Facebook and the Twitter anymore. There's all kinds of other applications out there that people use for social media. We do have a social media policy, and you can find that policy on the Provost webpage that I have listed there. If you'll go to their policies tab, there is a use of social media policy, and I would encourage you to read it if you're thinking about using social media as part of the learning experience for students. It's not that we forbid it. I don't want you to get that impression, but there are some things that we need to be cautious about in using social media, especially if we're using our own personal social media accounts, because we quite frequently can post some things or share some things, or other people post things to our social media that your students might find not in good taste, offensive, etc. And so we just want to avoid that as much as possible. Always be mindful of student privacy in any communication that you do. Student records are not to be divulged, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the remaining FERPA compliance slide here in just a few minutes. But always be mindful of student privacy and never communicate in a blast email personal identifiable information of individual students. So keep that in mind. Always keep your communications professional, and always assume that everything that you write to your student is going to be public. There is no such thing as private email. There is no such thing as a private letter. So if you're going to write something to a student, make sure it is professional, it reflects well of the university and yourself, and that it's factual. So keep all that in mind. And at the end of whatever you write, just think, is this something I'd want to go out in the public? Okay, kind of keep that in mind. Always keep communications respectful, whether they are written or oral. Our students deserve our respect as students, and so keep those communications respectful. Do not use degrading language or anything that might make a student feel uncomfortable. Just be factual, professional, and clear, and everything should be just fine. All of this really is to be summed up to have effective communication with our students. So keep that in mind. Are we being effective as we communicate with our students, regardless of the format of that communication? Want to talk to you a little bit about disability accommodations. This is for students with qualifying disabilities. Okay. If you have a student with a qualifying disability, you will know that because you will receive an electronic letter from the Office of Disability Accommodations, otherwise known as ODA. Okay. And that letter will give you some instructions of what you need to do to provide accommodations for that particular student. And it's very important that you follow the instructions within the letter. The letter will specify what you need to do to provide accommodations. For example, some students, because they have a learning disability, may need extra time to complete examinations. The letter will tell you what you can and what you can do to provide that accommodation. They will also provide services for you to help you provide that accommodation. ODA is there as a service as well to assist us in our teaching students that have qualifying disabilities. It's important that you do not identify the student in class. So keep privacy in mind at all times. So as an example, let's suppose you got an electronic letter from ODA. What you would not want to do is go into class the next day and say, Susie Smith, I need to see you in regards to your letter from ODA. That would have identified that student as having a disability that requires an accommodation. And that is not something that we want to do. It's not allowed. So if you need to have a conversation with Susie Smith, you can certainly ask that Susie Smith come up and see you, but keep the privacy part in mind. Take the student to the side after class to have the discussion in a place where it can't be overheard by other students. But don't identify that the student has any kind of disability that needs to be accommodated in public. Keep that in mind. You are to provide appropriate accommodations only to students with ODA verification. The Office of Disability Accommodations is responsible for determining the eligibility of a disability for disability accommodations. If you have any questions or need assistance in providing certain accommodations, feel free to contact the Office of Disability Accommodations at their website that you see there. They're more than happy to help in any way that they can to provide services to you and to the student to make sure that that student receives a quality learning experience. Very important for you not to determine eligibility on your own. If you suspect that a student has a learning disability, it is perfectly okay for you to refer them to the Office of Disability Accommodations in private. If you suspect that there is a learning disability that they need help with. I've had a number of students in the past that have come up and told me, well, I have ADHD. And I would say, well, I never received a letter from ODA informing me of that. That's why I haven't been providing you accommodations. And some of these students just didn't know that they needed to go through that process. So keep that in mind as well. This is a screenshot of the ODA website, and you can see on the left-hand side all of the contact information for ODA. Feel free to contact them if you have any further questions about information regarding disability accommodations. Also notice that on the Gulf Coast there is a different phone number, so you can call this number if you're teaching on the Gulf Coast campus, and they can help you provide the resources needed for a particular accommodation. Very important that we all remain FERPA compliant. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This was passed sometime in the early 1970s. I don't remember exactly when, so it's 40 years old or older. So this has been around for a long, long time. Basically, it's about students' right to keep their educational records private. And it can be complicated. And so I would encourage you to always err on the side of caution. If you have any questions about that, I'll have some links where you can go to find out some more information here on this slide in just a moment. But if in doubt, always ask. Basically, what you don't want to do is disclose student educational records. That is grades, primarily for us as instructors. Okay, so we want to make sure that only you and the student know how students are performing in a particular class. Now you can talk with your chair or other faculty members that are involved in teaching a particular class about things, as long as it remains confidential and it's a part of our normal things that we have to do to work. But as a rule, do not disclose student educational records. Do not publicly post student grades. Don't take a list of grades and paste them outside your office where it can clearly identify the student and what they made on a particular assignment or in the class. We don't want to do that. That is actually a violation of FERPA. And today with Blackboard, where you can actually, in a FERPA compliant manner, post grades within that grade book such that only the student can see how they've done on their particular assignments, there's really no need to publicly post grades anymore outside our office doors or windows. Do not discuss individual grades in class. This is a big one. Don't walk into your class and say, Johnny, I'm really disappointed that you failed the test. You have just divulged a student record. You can certainly talk about the overall class performance, but you cannot talk about individual grades in class. That would be a violation of FERPA. Make sure you don't talk about student grades or records over the phone. You never know if that truly is that student on the other side if you're on the phone. You can't verify it. So I've had students call me and have asked, how did I do on exam 3? And I'd say, Johnny, you need to come in and see me in the morning about that, and I can go over that with you. Giving out that kind of information over the phone, you're just not sure of the security of giving that out, because that may not be the person on the other end of the line. You will have situations, I'm almost positive, where parents or guardians or spouses are going to come in and talk to you about how their son, daughter, or husband and wife are doing in a particular class. You can't talk to them about their grades. Now, there are some nuances to that, but I don't want to get into those details. We're going to assume you just can't talk to them about that, okay? Unless there is a FERPA release on file, okay? So you can actually go into SOAR and you can determine whether or not the student has signed a FERPA release allowing you to release student record information to third parties. I always assume that they don't have one. And I have had students just walk into my office with their parent, and before we get started, I always say, to the student, I need you to sign a release before I can discuss any of your records in front of your parents. And I actually have some copies of some FERPA releases in my office. You can get some on the registrar website and have that student fill that out, have them sign it, and then you can have the conversations that you need to have. But make sure that you have that in writing before you move on that. Very important. If you want to learn more, you can actually learn more about the federal law itself at the Department of Education website here on the top. This www.ed.gov policy and all this stuff on FERPA. You can learn more about the law there. Most of what you're really going to want to know, though, you can find out on the registrar's website. So if you go to usm.edu/registrar, you'll find a FERPA student privacy description there. I highly recommend that you read that. It's very informative. But always remember, err on the side of caution and remain FERPA compliant in everything that we do. I want to talk a little bit about the GEC, or the General Education Curriculum. Many adjunct instructors at the university are teaching in the GEC. These are typically our freshman and sophomore level courses. Usually they're quite large sections. So in the College of Science and Technology, our general biologies, our lower level math classes, etc., typically are fairly large classes, and we quite frequently have adjunct instructors teaching in those. Now, the GEC 01 through 05 are what we would call kind of quote unquote the university general ed requirements, or probably where you went to school, they were referred to as core requirements. And some people around here use that terminology as well. For us in the College of Science and Technology, it is currently GEC 02 that we're going to be concerned with. That's the science and math requirement. You can find out more about the GEC at this particular website. This is the science requirement. All students at the University of Southern Mississippi are required to complete 8 hours of science courses, whether they're in our college or other colleges. And that can be satisfied by any of these courses you see listed here. So anything from astronomy, various biology courses, various chemistry courses, various geology courses and geography courses, physics, marine science, polymer science. There's quite a large array of courses that can be used to satisfy that, and all of these are general education courses, and they all typically are fairly large courses to teach as well. Also, if you happen to be teaching in math, the GEC is quite broad for math. It's Math 100, which is quantitative reasoning, or college algebra, or higher numbered math course. So pretty much so, if you're not teaching the remedial math course, you can assume that math course could be used to satisfy a general education curriculum requirement. The GEC courses all have student learning outcomes that are specific to the various GEC courses. You need to know which student learning outcomes pertain to your class, because you're going to be required to keep assessment records of your students for end of year or end of semester assessment and reporting purposes. So I would highly recommend that you go talk to your department chair about which student learning outcomes need to be addressed in your particular class, so that you can make sure that you're collecting the right data in your student records, so that at the end of the semester they can quickly gather that data and put it in their end of year report. Make sure you keep good assessment records. Make sure that they're archived quite well in your gradebook. And make sure you used any approved rubrics. So several GEC courses, the departments will actually have a rubric that is used in the assessment of particular student assignments or student activities. Make sure that you're using the appropriate instrument or the appropriate rubric that has been approved by your department. So again, in terms of this, make sure you go and talk to your department chair or whoever they've designated that you need to speak with about what you're doing in that GEC course. Also note that there's a 2,500 word writing requirement in GEC 01 through 05 courses, except for math. That does not mean, and I want to stress this, that does not mean that you have to assign a 10-page paper to that student to satisfy that 2,500 word writing requirement. But make sure that you talk to whoever's in charge of assessing the GEC in your particular department. It's probably going to be the chair or some other designee, and do whatever they've set up to be done for that 2,500 word writing requirement. Just to give you a little bit of information, that 2,500 word writing requirement is really there because we believe that students, through writing, can do some of their best learning. Not necessarily that we want to know that they can write a 10-page research paper. Many of these students are going to be taking your class without having completed English yet, English composition courses yet. So it's a writing requirement that is really there to facilitate the learning process, not so much necessarily there to just improve the writing skills, although we hope that is an outcome. But keep that in mind as you think about your GEC courses. You can find out more information on the GEC at these links. The Info Center page that you see up there on the top gives an entire description of the GEC, and then this Writing Center link that you see below that gives you some information where students can be directed to the Writing and Speaking Centers if your particular GEC course involves the writing and speaking. And so this is a screenshot of the Writing Center's webpage. You can see all kinds of information here on the left. Students can make appointments to get help with their writing. There's links and handouts about writing. If you're on the Gulf Coast, there is a Writing and Speaking Center. You can find out information there. On the Hattiesburg campus, we have a separate speaking center. It's right next to the Writing Center in the Cook Library. So if you have speaking assignments that are required as part of your course, you can certainly have students go over to the speaking center and use the facilities there to get the assistance that they need to become better public speakers. And also there's information on Turnitin if you want to use Turnitin, where students can turn in their writing assignments through this online portal. It also helps check for things like plagiarism, grammar, and other things like that. And you can see all kinds of contact information, and there will also be a schedule of hours for the Writing and Speaking Center. This shot was captured this summer, and so it kind of gave the times that it was open during the summer hours, and that'll change, of course, during the fall and spring. So always go back to this web page to see the updated hours of operation. I want to talk a little bit about syllabus requirements. All syllabi must be handed out to students within the first week of class. And in the College of Science and Technology, all of the syllabi must contain the following information. You need to have instructor contact information. Students need to know who you are, where your office is located, and how they can reach you by phone and or email. And they need to know what your office hours are. All that information needs to be on your instructor contact information right at the top of your syllabus. Your syllabus should also contain course goals and objectives, what it is that a student who leaves your course should be leaving with. You need to include evaluation criteria. How are you going to evaluate that written paper? How are you going to evaluate that particular assignment, etc.? Are you going to use a rubric? If so, provide a copy of that rubric to the students so that they know exactly how they're being evaluated. You need to include your grading scale. What does it take to get an A in this class? What does it take to get a B in this class? So on and so forth. Students have a right to know how their grade will be determined. There needs to be a statement on disability accommodations. I would highly recommend that you use the standard language. That standard language you can find on the Provost website under the Teaching Resources tab on the left, but I have included it here. This is the standard language, and in all of my syllabi, I simply copy this from the website and put it into my syllabus. So you could pause here if you need to write this down, but again, you can go straight to the Provost website and get this information quite easily. There needs to be a statement on academic integrity, and again, I would use the standard language, and again, you can find this on the Provost website. But this academic integrity, very important that you read this as well. So this involves academic dishonesty, such as cheating, plagiarism, falsification of documents, disclosure of testing materials, etc. Students need to know what how you feel about a number of these things. Notice also here that we have a link to the actual academic integrity policy itself. I would highly recommend that you go to this link and view this particular policy. Notice there's an XF grade, which is a failing grade due to academic misconduct, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on the grades and grading slide in this particular screencast. You need to list the required and recommended course materials. What books do you require for the course? What other types of materials are required for the course? And remember, all required materials have to be available through the Barnes & Noble bookstore on campus. So all of that has been already determined. If you're an adjunct instructor coming in kind of at the last minute, your chair has put that information in there, and those are the course materials that you need to use. You can also list recommended course materials that aren't required. So for example, maybe there's a book on reserve in the library that you would like the students to go and and read a little bit out of to supplement the required materials, that's perfectly fine. You can do those types of things, but list it in your syllabus. It's also useful if you'll list helpful resources. I would say at a minimum, list the Student Success website, usm.edu/success, that you saw in a previous slide on this screencast. Also, list any other helpful resources that you can think of that the students might need to be successful in your course. So, for example, let's suppose you're teaching a geology course and there's a particular website on the National Geological Survey government site that has a lot of information that students might find useful in your class. It's good to put that kind of information in your syllabus so students can access that information easily. It's also important to include calendar dates. Students need to know when the drop deadline is for a particular semester, what the final exam date and time will be for their class. Another note on this, final exams have to be given at the university specified time. So no exceptions to that. Make sure that you know yourself when you're putting your syllabus together what that final exam date and time will be. And make sure you put that in your syllabus and stick to it. You need to list what your attendance policy is for the course. And as I mentioned earlier, an attendance policy is considered one of the best practices for student success. Your policy, however, cannot be counter to what is listed in the Faculty Handbook, section 4.5.4, which I have listed here. So you can read this on your own, but basically what this says is that while you have the right to set an attendance policy, your attendance policy has to take into account the fact that there are some university-sanctioned activities for which students are excused, and you need to allow them to make up anything that they missed due to that university-sanctioned activity. So, for example, let's suppose you have a student who's on the football team. They are required to travel with the team quite frequently on Fridays for their game on Saturday. And if you have an exam on that Friday, you really need to work with them so that they can make that up, either by taking the exam before they leave or when they return. There's many ways in which that can be handled, but we just can't simply say there are no makeups at all because that particular student is actually required to travel on behalf of the university and their scholarship is depending on it. So we can't really have we can't have a policy that is counter to the Faculty Handbook 4.5.4. So keep that in mind as you're writing your attendance policies. GEC course syllabi have additional things that must be within the syllabus. You need to list explicitly which student learning outcomes the GEC course addresses. You need to list the course content and activities. You need to list any reading, writing, and speaking requirements of that particular course. And you need to list the instructional methods, resources, and student performance standards. Now you'll note that these last two really are also included in some of the things that I mentioned up above that we're looking to see in all of our syllabi within the College of Science and Technology. You can also go to the Provost website, usm.edu/provost, and go to the Teaching Resources tab on the left. And there is a sample syllabus template that you can download and use for your convenience as well. Let's talk a little bit about grades and grading. I believe firmly that students deserve quality feedback as part of grading, not just a letter or a number. So it's very important that as we grade, we have some method of providing feedback to students so that they can learn and improve. Again, as I mentioned earlier, learning is the goal of higher education. All faculty must submit various grades through our SOAR system, which is our Southern Online Access to Records, I believe is what that stands for. And it allows, it is the official way in which we report various grades here at the university. You're going to be required early on in the semester, within the first week, to report what's known as an NA grade, and that is for students who are not attending. early in the semester. This is a very, very important thing for all of our faculty to actually do. The NA grade roster is actually used to determine which students have signed up for courses but failed to show up and aren't really students at the university anymore. This has actual financial consequences here at the university because we pay our auxiliary units based on enrollment. If we don't have an accurate enrollment number, we may be overpaying those auxiliary units. And so that's really taking money out of the academic side of the house, if you will. So it's very important for you to have some measure of determining who's attending your classes so that you can accurately report the not attending roster when it's requested by the registrar. You'll also be required to enter an interim grade in the semester. At this point in the semester during midterm, is what most people refer to it as, but it's a little before midterm actually, when interim grades are due. It's important that you not assign an I grade at interim because that's meaningless. The whole point of the interim grade is to give both the student and their advisor information about how they're doing in that class so that they can prepare for next semester. So as an advisor, when I go through and I look at a student's interim grades, if I know that they're doing pretty well in a course that's a prerequisite to another course, I'll go ahead and get them enrolled in that particular course. If I see that they're doing poorly in a prerequisite course, then we have another conversation about what they need to do to improve and to let them know that, if you don't successfully complete this course, you're not going to be on track to graduate in 4 years. So we can have those types of conversations. But if I see I's, which stand for incomplete, I have no way of knowing whether that student is actually performing well or not at that particular point in time. So the way that I view the interim grade is it is a snapshot of their performance. So how are they doing at that particular moment in time? So if up to interim grade they've had 2 exams, which is worth a total of 200 points, I simply take the number of points that they've earned on those 2 exams, divide it by the 200, figure out what that percentage is, and that's what I report as the interim grade, whatever that comes out to in a letter grade. The interim grade is not an official grade, and sometimes it's not terribly predictive of how they're going to do at the end, but it should be as predictive as possible. So make sure you have enough assignments before interim grade to actually make a good solid case for the student's performance at that point. And of course, you'll also give a final course grade, and these are due almost always the Monday after commencement. I can't recall a time that they weren't. So commencement's on a Friday. Final course grades are due usually by 11 a.m. on Monday after that Friday commencement. So that kind of gives you an idea of when your final course grades are going to be due to the registrar. Now, you can find the official dates and times for all of the things that we've been talking about by going to the Office of the Registrar, looking over on the left and finding the Faculty Staff tab and going to Grade Entry. And when you do that, you're going to see this screen. Now this, again, is for the summer of 2016, and it'll change for the fall. But you can see here when the not attending grade were due in SOAR, when the interim grades are due, the final grades, etc. You can find all that information on that particular web page so that you know exactly when you have to do these various grade entries. You'll also receive emails from your department chair and the registrar regarding grade entry. We keep really close tabs on this, so make sure you get your grades entered on time for the NA grade, the interim grade, and the final course grade. A final grade of I, incomplete, can be assigned, but it should be fairly rare. You cannot use an I grade at the end to arbitrarily extend a semester for a particular student. So let's say a student just didn't show up for the final and they have no good excuse, and you say, well, I'll just give you an I and you can make it up later. That's really not allowed because you're arbitrarily extending the semester for a student over another student for no real good reason. And so that's actually a problem. So don't do that. If you do give an I at the end of the semester, you need to have an agreement with the student on what needs to be completed. So quite frequently what happens, or at least in my experience, When I typically give an I to a student, something drastic has happened. For example, the student has ended up being hospitalized during the week of finals. I work with them to let them know what it is that they need to do to complete the course to get the I removed. And when that needs to be completed by, I'll give them the I grade at the end of the semester. They then come back early in the following semester, take that final exam, for example, get the grade, and then I do a grade change to whatever they earn. But you need to have an agreement with the student. You can't just assign an I to a student without talking with them about what they need to do to convert that I into an actual grade. This must only be used for situations that are clearly beyond the control of the student. Again, a student has been hospitalized at the last minute, something to that effect, something that serious. I'm sure there are other examples out there, but it can't just be arbitrarily assigned to extend the semester for a student. Always remember that your grades must be defensible. No arbitrary assignment of grades. You can't just assign a student a grade because you like them. It has to be something that they've earned. They have to have merited it, and it needs to be defensible. So it's possible that a student who feels like they've been unjustly given a grade can appeal that grade and have that grade reviewed through a grade appeals committee. It's fairly rare, but it does happen, and that's another reason why you need to make sure that you keep accurate records of all of your assignments and student communications, etc. Because should a student decide to appeal a grade and it makes it all the way up to the grade appeal committee, you'll need to provide evidence that you didn't arbitrarily assign a grade to a student. The XF grade, that has to do with the new academic integrity policy, and these are only to be used for failure for a course due to academic misconduct. In other words, you failed the student in that course because they cheated. They had somebody else taking their exams for them. They had somebody else writing their papers for them, and you can prove it. Very important that you keep that in mind, that you need to be certain that the student did actually participate in academic misconduct when you assign this XF grade. This is a very serious thing, so make sure that if you assign an XF grade, you're quite confident in the academic misconduct. Because if a student has, I think, 3 or more XF grades, they can be dismissed from the university. And so there's serious consequences with assigning an XF grade, although it could be appropriate in some cases. Again, make sure you keep all records of your grades and provide those copies of those grade books to the department or school that you're working in at the end of each semester. I want to just finish up the screencast by talking a little bit about the need to reflect on our teaching. I want you to remember that teaching is a process, and that each time that we teach, I hope we get a little better. I know I certainly do strive to improve every semester, so keep that in mind. It's very important to pay attention to the class performance and what's going on in a class, and alter your style or methods as needed. Now, that's not to say that you need to go in and change a bunch of things every semester. I'm not suggesting that at all. But sometimes we try things that just don't resonate with the class, and they're not really responding to it. Well, there's no real reason to continue doing those things. And it's okay to make some small tweaks and changes throughout a semester to try to improve class attendance, to try to improve class performance, class participation, those types of things. So if you're finding that certain assignments just aren't really working out as you had intended, there's nothing wrong with making some changes. So pay attention to how the class is responding to your teaching style, how it is that you're presenting the information, and make small alterations as needed to improve the learning opportunities of our students. And after all, that's what it's all about. It's not about us getting through the class each day. It's about our students leaving having learned something. So we need to encourage that and promote that as much as possible. I think it's important that we all continue to improve as teachers through study and reflection. It's okay to, at the end of every class period, to kind of spend a few moments and reflect about how you felt that class went, what you think you can do better next time, what you think you did really well on. And there's a lot of things you're going to do that really turn out quite well, and you need to give yourself credit for that. But also study a little bit. If you're thinking about trying something new in a classroom, which I encourage everybody to do, one of the first things I think we should do is look and see, has anybody else done something like this? Study what they've done. Try to learn from their mistakes. And remember, it's okay to ask a colleague to provide some tips and pointers. The University of Southern Mississippi has numerous faculty members and instructors who have been here for many, many years and have tried many, many different things in class and have a lot of experience that you can build upon and utilize. So I encourage people to come to me and bounce ideas off me. That's perfectly fine. I enjoy talking about different teaching strategies. Another thing that you can ask some of your colleagues to do is to have them come and observe some of your teaching and give you feedback. Or you can also just video. Get a small video camera and have somebody video what you're doing in the classroom. And then you can do some self-reflection that way. Also, I encourage you to take your course evaluations seriously. So you will get an opportunity to look, your students will get an opportunity to evaluate your course. And you will also be given an opportunity to receive those evaluations. So ask your department chair for those evaluations once they become available, usually a couple weeks after the semester is over, and spend some time looking at them. I continuously look at my course evaluations and I look for trends. So if you see comments that are coming up repeatedly by a variety of students, that indicates something that you might need to think seriously about and maybe make some changes. You'll get a number of student evaluations that are glowing, and you need to look at that. So you need to know what it is that most of the students think you're doing really, really well. So take those course evaluations very seriously. We do here in the College of Science and Technology, every semester I'm given the student or the course evaluations for all faculty, and I do spend some time looking through all of them to see if there's areas where as a college we need to maybe put some attention and efforts in. I would also encourage you to look at a few books that I've read in the past that I have found useful as I've thought about my teaching. The book How Learning Works, 7 Research-Based Principles for Smart Teaching by Susan Ambrose and others is a very good read. Many of us come to teaching at the university being experts in our field, not experts in teaching. And this is one of the things that really taught me how students really learn. Not so much what I need to do to teach, but really how the learning process works. And it's a very valuable book in my opinion, and I would highly recommend it. Another book that is quite easy to read and get through in a short amount of time is this book by James Lang, Small Teaching, and it's all about small things that we can do in the classroom that could have a big impact on our teaching and students' learning. So it's not a big grandiose book about complete overhauls of courses, but just little things that you can do along the way during a semester that can actually impact your teaching quite positively. And then another book that I think is very good to read, especially for those of us here in the College of Science and Technology, is Reaching Students. And this is what research says about effective instruction in undergraduate science and engineering. This was published in 2015 by the National Academies. And you can actually download a free PDF of this by going to their website. The easiest way to get this is simply to Google Reaching Students, by National Academies Press, and it'll be in your Google search at the very top, and you can get the PDF there for free. So I hope this short screencast has given you kind of some ideas of the essentials that you need to be thinking about as you enter into your teaching role here at the University of Southern Mississippi. And again, I want to thank you for coming to Southern Miss to share your expertise with our students and teach in many of the classes that we offer. And also, I want to remind you that my office is open should you ever have any questions about teaching or any issues that may come up with any students that you may have. So feel free to always stop by my office and introduce yourself. I'm always happy to have a conversation with you. So good luck with the semester, and I look forward to meeting you soon.